All right, everybody. Welcome to episode number 88 of Tackle and Tacos, a fishing podcast. I would just like to take a second before we get too deep into it and apologize for my voice. It's not super awful, but it's not great. My entire family, Lola, myself, and our 45 kids all had influenza A this last week. And then Gussie, our boy, our 3-year-old boy, just turned 3. He had influenza A and a double ear infection. So we've all been like just beat to death, kind of getting back on our feet now. And so my voice sounds a little pluggy. Hopefully I don't end up coughing a bunch or like snotting a bunch. Also, before we get too far into this episode, it's just me on this one. I'm sorry. But before we get too far into it, I would definitely suggest if you're listening to this podcast, first off, thank you so much. But also maybe consider jumping over to the Yerturbs for this one because we're going to be talking jerkbaits. This episode is called Everything I Know About Jerkbaits. And there's going to be a lot of like visual stuff. So I'm going to show you some rod and reel setups I have, some lures. I have my two Bass Mafia coffins of jerkbaits, and that's not all of them, but kind of my main ones that I like. And then I have some that are still in the package, and it might make more sense if you're wanting to learn more, get better at jerkbaiting. And I don't even for 1 second pretend to be an expert. What I do know is I've been jerkbaiting for decades now, literally decades. I've been obsessed with them for decades, and what I'm about to barf on you is the accumulation of those decades of fishing jerkbaits. And so I think it might help if you are on video and you can see more than just here. Look at this Quick Trip cup. The Quick Trip Green Bay Packer mug or cardboard cup. So dope. So this episode, like all of them, is brought to you by the fine people at Grizzly Coolers, grizzlycoolers.com. Code WCB gets you 15% off of everything sans hunting blinds. So that's a lot of stuff. The apparel, the drinkware, this really dope bag that you can see behind me here, this cooler behind me, all kinds of Grizzly stuff, 15% off with WCB, Giltech, and Hook and Arrow Supply Co., Loopholed Optics, Waypoint TV. We're so pumped to be a part of the Working Class Bowhunter Podcast Network. Them boys have been killing it in the podcast game since 2015. And my guess is back then when they would tell their buddies like, hey, we're doing a podcast, people were probably like, what's a podcast? And now if you tell anybody, hey, I'm doing a podcast, they'll be like, oh, really? Me too. Everybody has a podcast, but them boys been killing it for a long time. So the fact that they wanted us to be a part of their network is pretty humbling, pretty awesome. Workingclassbowhunter.com. You can go on there, find all kind of merch and hats and all kinds of stuff that I designed for them. Not all of it, but a vast majority of it I've designed for them over the years. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you have a brand, if you have a business, if you are wanting to start something, reach out to me. Contact at tackleandtacos.com. I used to have my own marketing firm called Combination Creative, which I've kind of given up, and now I'm sort of missing it. I like doing it. And so I'd be honored to work with you. I've worked with a lot of big companies, a lot of small companies, a lot of people who just wanted the t-shirt, whatever. Holler at me. So original music, like the Working Class Bowhunter theme song, I did that. Our theme song, the theme songs for this, for Tackle and Tacos, this one. And then this one. Anyway, theme songs, video. That's where I really cut my teeth in this stuff is video, logo design, apparel design, website design. That's a big one. And I can turn websites around faster than anybody on earth. Like, I kid you not. If you pay me for a website, I could probably have it done. And I'm talking about done in 3 days, 5 days, a week at the very most. I can turn websites around really quick. But holler at me, contact at tackleandtacos.com, and we can talk about all that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, yeah, if you're not watching this one on YouTube, maybe you should, because we're going to get into jerkbaits. And I'm so excited for this episode. This is something we've wanted to do since we first started Tackle and Tacos, is talk to amazing people, like Miles Berghoff, like Matt from Omnia, which if you have not listened or watched that episode, I really cannot oversuggest that you do. We are not sponsored by Omnia, so it's not like some kind of plug. They're just doing stuff on a whole different level of like intentionality, thought throughness, and yet it has the feel of Chuck's Bait Shop from the Grumpy Old Men movies. So it's like really smart, really technological, and yet it's also very like, hey, what are they biting on? And so I would definitely go back and listen to that one, watch that one. It's awesome what they're doing over there at Omnia Fishing. But we want to do interviews with people like that. But we also, from the genesis of Tackle and Tacos, we wanted to have episodes that were tackle specific, like lure specific. And we did one on frogs, and that might literally be the only one we've done so far that is like super tackle specific. And it's cold right now in Wisconsin. It is 34 degrees, which is not terrible. Most of the country, it's cold right now. And so when you think of cold, a lot of people think of jerkbaits. And I'm going to try to disprove that theory and tell you what I truly believe. Justin Hamner, we haven't launched his episode yet, but we had him on. It was so fun. Like what a cool dude. What a friend vibe, just being like, there was like 2 or 3 times where we all stopped because we were all laughing so hard and like wiping our faces from tears, and just such an authentic human. And I asked him, I said, what's because he's obviously like a jerk bait master. I mean, tippy top of the game when it comes to jerk baits. And I said, what's a tip? And like, without skipping a beat, and I'm not going to say verbatim, I can't remember how he said it, but he was basically just like, they work everywhere all the time. And so very often, like I said, it's cold out. People sort of think cold water, cold air temperatures, jerkbait time. Jerkbaits work all the time. They truly do. And they're so versatile. Depth, size, cadence, meaning how fast or how slow you pop it. I've heard people say you should never throw one out and reel it back in. I don't agree. I don't think it's a very great option, but when they're really not moving, when you can just kind of, it's almost like dead sticking a Cinco. You can just kind of reel it, and they'll have like a little bit of a there's all kinds of ways to fish a jerkbait. And so we're going to get into it. And what I'm really excited about with the jerkbait episode, and like I said, we're calling this Everything I Know About Jerkbaits, is I wanted to get into the history of jerkbaiting as well, which I'm not smart enough to know the history of jerkbaiting, like where jerkbaits came from, when did they first come out, that kind of thing. And so what I did was recruited the help of my friend Ken Duke, who, as many people may know, is basically like the bass fishing historian. But the cool thing about Ken, and if you don't listen to Bass After Dark, his podcast, you're missing out. It's so good and so funny, and intelligent. And he does an awesome job putting it together. It's well produced, great guests, like plural guests. Like he had Milliken and Randy Blockett on at the same time. And that's like having, I don't know, any NFL team and the refs when they play the Chiefs on, just enemies, on the same podcast. And so, Bass After Dark, make sure you check that out. It's freaking dope. But I reached out to him and I was like, dude, give me the history of it. So we're going to talk about today. I got some notes here. We're going to talk about jerkbaits, episode 88. My first time using a jerkbait. I think I've kind of shared it a little bit on this show. History of jerkbaits, again, with help from Ken Duke. I'll probably just read you the email I sent him and then read you his explanation back so I don't screw anything up. Types of jerkbaits and brands, which I'm going to show you from my box, and have some in packages here. Setups, rods and reels. We're going to go over that kind of thing. How to work a jerkbait. And I'm not going to be like vague. We're going to get super specific on ways that I know. And just know, as I go over this stuff, I'm not getting any of this material from any specific like video or In Fisherman or Bassmaster magazine. Like, these are just the things that I've learned over the decades of throwing jerkbaits that work. Maybe subconsciously I picked these up from somewhere else. Absolutely. I don't exist in a vacuum. But what I'm saying is that all this stuff is stuff that I've learned over the years. And so maybe you've watched other jerkbaits with experts like, I don't know, Blockett or Brandon Polinick or somebody, Hank Cherry, somebody who's a great jerkbait fisherman. And they said the same thing. Sure, maybe. But I'm not specifically like taking their nuggets, if that makes any sense. So how to use them. The hook set, that's really important. That's one thing. When I first started jerk bait fishing, I just could not get right. And there's some things that go into that, some tips and some tricks. Yeah, and I think that's it. So let's get into it. So the very first time, and again, I think I may have shared this story before on our podcast, the first time I ever saw a jerk bait, it was a Rapala husky jerk, and it was a little one, like a 2-hook one, not even like a Lucky Craft Pointer 90. I mean, I don't know what this thing would be, like a 60. Like, it was very short, and it was like, I can't remember the name of the color, but it was chrome blue and like orange. And I was up in Hayward. My parents are divorced, and on my dad's side, every year, once a year, it kind of varied, like May, June, July, we would go up to Hayward for a week. And that was what my entire life revolved around, was going up there to fish. And then when I got old enough to take a rowboat out by myself, you would just literally never see me at the cabin. I was just constantly fishing. And then when I got old enough to take a boat with a motor out, boy, I was gone. Like, I wouldn't come back for food. I wouldn't bring water with. I wouldn't bring with like suntan protected, what do you call that? Sunscreen. It's so funny, man. Like, sometimes my brain just does not work. I would just be gone. And we were up there one year, and my uncle Brad Johnson, shout out, he pulled out a Rapala husky jerk, chrome, blue, and orange, and said, "Hey, look at this on the dock." And he had it on a spinning rod, and he kind of threw it out, and he kind of just dragged it on tight line by the dock. And I was like, "Oh, cool. It moves like a crankbait." And then he stopped it. And I was like, "What the beep is that? Like, what kind of devilry, what kind of witchcraft is this shit?" Like, I remember just being so, like, actually, I mean, I can still see it in my head now. So, like, wait a second, that's not sinking, and it's not floating. You stopped it, and it stopped. And it was basically from there in that I was just obsessed. Like, that was it. And I think it was the same trip, that same week there, that year, that I for the first time ever saw bass on a bed. They were spawning, and I didn't know what bass on a bed was. All I knew was I was moving around the lake in my little rowboat, and up by the shore, there was really big bass in a little circle that looks like they made, and they wouldn't bite anything. And then, what if I throw out this husky jerk, and I get it because the water's so clear there in northern Hayward, or northern Wisconsin, in Hayward area, gin clear. This was upper Eau Claire Lake. If I get that bait, I can see where it's at. What if I just bring it down and just let it just sit right in their bed, right in the middle, not sinking, not floating, just bam. And sure as shoot, I threw it out there, kind of cranked it down, stopped it right in front of them, and they swam around it, and they circled around it. And then after a minute, the big mama came up and just and bit it, and I reeled it in, and I was just like, dude, this is it. Like, this is the greatest kind of fishing ever. Jerk baits are the best way you'll ever catch a bass. And I don't know if I've changed off that, honestly, in the 20 something years I've been throwing these things. The jerk baits have changed. The methods for throwing them has changed a little bit. The equipment you use certainly has changed. But the love for that jerk bait bite, man, it's never gone away. And so I asked Ken Duke, let me just read this email real quick, and then we'll get into all the nitty gritty, as Nacho Libre would say. I said, "Hey, man, I'm going to do a jerkbait episode. Do you have any insights on the history of the jerkbait?" And this is where I said something totally erroneous, but I didn't even really realize it. I said, "I don't necessarily mean the Rapala original floating minnow, though its shape is jerkbait-ish, but I mean more so like the neutrally buoyant jerkbait." And I said, my first one ever, I'm not suggesting it was the first one ever, but my first one ever was a husky jerk. Appreciate you, man. Like always, Bass After Dark is amazing. And he said back in like 5 seconds, because it's just how Ken is, and I guarantee this was with no looking up. He just knows stuff. He said, first, the Rapala floating minnow really was the first bait of its style. I have one right here. This is just a 2-hook one. This is a Rapala original floating minnow. This is an orange one. This is a shorter one. It's not like the long 3-hook style one, but you can see it there. It's a slender bait with the bill that's not super steep on the front. And by the way, this is a fish catching machine. This exact size, this exact color, to use almost like a wake bait, or to pop up and let it kind of skitter around on the surface. This is a smallmouth killer. I don't know if you can tell on video. 2 of those back trebles on this Rapala are bent out. That's from smallmouth. Anyway, he said it was the first bait of its style, but was more typically used as a twitch bait. A sinking version, the Countdown minnow by Rapala, came out in the early 60s or early 70s. In between, anglers were adding soldering, like from a soldering gun, or heavier hooks to get those original ones to sink or be a little more or less neutrally buoyant. So if you have the basic body style of the floating minnow, the only difference, and I thought this was a great insight, the only difference between that and a modern jerkbait is the manner in which it's fished. As soon as you start twitch, pause, when you start jerking it, it's a jerkbait. And he's right. So the floating minnow is definitely what he thinks the first ever jerkbait. And I thought that was a really cool thought, because I didn't really think of the original floating minnow as a jerkbait, even though I think you could see how I couldn't, and I think you could see how I could. Anyway, but if you choose to overlook that, and he said, but I would not, then I would tell you that the old Smithwick Rogue was commonly weighed with lead tape, or, like those suspend dots or suspend strips. We'll get into those in a little bit. Long before the Husky Jerk came out, and the Rogue came in a suspending version, because it wasn't always, just so you know, the Smithwick Rogue, like I have here, this is a Smithwick Suspending Pro Rogue in the box. This is an awesome color. It's called Lime Crush, Lemon Lime Crush. This is an awesome bait. People overlook these so much because there's so many other, I think essentially there's just like sexier models out there. But gosh, dog it. The Rogue, Smithwick Rogue, floating and the suspending like this, these catch fish. These catch fish. Don't sleep on them. All those early suspending jerkbaits needed help. They either floated a little, so we'd add weight, or they sank a little, so you'd put on smaller hooks. The first neutrally buoyant jerkbait that was any good right out of the package was the Lucky Craft Pointer minnow in the late 90s. But by then, everyone was already adding tape or lead to heavy hooks to their favorite jerkbaits to make them behave the way that they wanted them to. Thanks, Jordan. I hope you're great. Let me shut down mail. So that was kind of cool, again, because I didn't really think of the original Rapala minnow as a jerkbait, but it totally is, and the shape is exactly what jerkbaits look like nowadays. And so let's get into real quick a couple of my favorites, some of my favorite jerkbaits out there. And again, I'm going to try and hold them up to the camera here. I'm using my phone connected to my computer, so hopefully it's a little clearer. Again, if you're not on YouTube, you might want to be. But they come in all different shapes and sizes. They're all generally pretty slender. There's obviously, this is really. And for good reason. This is really the standard. Okay. This is a Megabass Vision 110. In my opinion, I don't care who you talk to, who you ask. Yeah, that looks really good on camera there. This is the absolute best jerkbait on the market. This is the 110. And again, this comes in a million different colors. You can get it in a 110 Junior. You can get it in a 110 Magnum. You can get it in a 110 plus one, which is a little longer bill, a 110 plus two, which is an even longer bill. And the colors for Megabass jerkbaits are unfreaking believable. And I know this beyond just my own opinion because our good buddy AJ of Horseshoe Custom Baits, who is a just next level painter. I mean, it's nonsense. He said he can't copy the Megabass colors. So if somebody like him, who I respect the fire out of when it comes to paint, says I can't duplicate the Megabass colors, that means the Megabass colors really are that good. This one is French Pearl, of course, like that kind of pearly blue hue. My favorite by far, in the Megabass 110 colors, this is a 110 plus one, is this color here. It's called Elegy Bone. So what it is, it's kind of a table rock shad. It's got chartreuse on the bottom, purple on the top, but then the inside is see-through, transparent, and it has like a bone pattern painted on it. This is a 110 plus one, Megabass, an Elegy Bone. This thing is just filthy. It looks good. It moves even better. This has those out barbs where I don't know if I'll be able to show this on camera. Let me try. Can you see it there? Basically, the Megabass 110, besides the new one, which is called the Great Hunting, they utilize a style of treble hook called an out barb. So instead of the barbs being on the inside of the bend of the hook, they're on the outside, like facing away from the meat of the hook, which work really well. They're really sticky. What I will say though, and I actually had this written in my notes somewhere, if you don't know how to do the braided line fish hook trick to get treble hooks out of your skin, I would definitely look that up. YouTube, Google the braided line hook trick, because there's something about jerk baits and getting fish in the boat or on the shore or whatever, that when they get all riled up and angry when these 3 hooks are in their face, or two hooks, I said that weird, are in their face, that they like to throw them and stick them in your hands. And you need to know how to get those things out of your hands. This is a Megabass 110 plus 2. So that means the bill is a little longer and it's a little wider. If you look at it on camera there, you can see it's not just a longer bill, but it's actually thicker. Like if you're looking at it from above, the bill is actually wider, which allows it to dive deeper. This is a absolutely ridiculous color. I can't remember what it's called, but I love it. It's white with the red eye and like the little pattern on top. I know there's people out there who can be like, you idiot, that's this color. Everybody knows that color. But this is a filthy bait. And the neat thing too about Megabass lures, I know they're expensive, but the finishes, the paint is not only really good, but it also is really durable. Like I've caught a ton of fish on that one. And here's what I like to call a Megabass ornament tree. This is many Megabass lures all stuck together. So here's a little bit different one. This is called a Megabass Edo Shiner. Another one that I really like is a Megabass Kanata, which is a little bit bigger. And then this is one that I don't really see anywhere anymore. And this is the 110 Magnum with a couple other ones stuck to it. It's just the 110, but bigger. So I think it's actually like 120 something. Hold on, I'll try and detangle these real quick and show you the size comparison between them. And this is like an old adage, you know, but it's true. Let the fish tell you what they want. So sometimes there's going to be times where it's good to throw a little bit bigger bait. So this is the 110 plus 1 and the 110 Magnum on top of each other. And you can see that the 110 Magnum is a good bit longer. Both in my favorite color, Eleggy Bone, just like that Edo Shiner. If you're just getting into Megabass and you don't want to spend a ton of money right out of the gates, if you asked me what are some colors I should focus on, I think Eleggy Bone is my favorite. I think it plays in clear water, muddy water, which again, like Justin Hamner said, jerk baits work everywhere. Don't fool yourself, man. They really do. So muddy water, generally the idea is brighter colors work better. Clear water, realistic colors work better. Eleggy Bone has a bit of enough of both, realistic with the translucent and like the bone color, and the bright with the chartreuse and the purple, that it works everywhere. Otherwise, this one is called Pro Blue, Megabass 110 Pro Blue. This is kind of a must. If you're going to get into throwing Megabass jerk baits, the Pro Blue is kind of a must. It's a very staple. It works everywhere. It works great. I'll bet you this lure looks like new if you look at it. I'll bet you I've caught 100 fish on just this one alone. And it just holds up really well. If you look on camera right now, you can kind of see if I can get it to focus right. This is hard. Anyway, I look like I'm doing a dance, but I'm trying to show you one thing that Megabass does really well, of course, is they have a weight transfer system inside of the body of the lure. So when you cast it, those old school Rapala originals, just like Rapala Shad Raps, man, it was like trying to throw a popsicle stick. They were like those little things you pull off the trees in the fall and they helicopter down. That's kind of what the old school original minnows and Shad Rap, they were so light. These have these big weights in them. Another jerk bait that I don't think I have any in this box, I think they're all in the boat, I'm sorry, is the Jackal Re-Range. Not rearrange, just Re-Range. The Jackal Re-Range, the weight transfer system is nonsense. You can literally, as you cast it, you can hear them go, you can hear them like the balls transfer in the bait, and those things take off like a bottle rocket. And a quick pro tip, if you fish in the north and you don't have any Jackal Re-Ranges in perch, you are tripping. You are tripping. They are so good and so realistic and move so well and cast like an absolute rocket. They even kind of sound like a rocket. That is a great, great jerkbait. I would definitely invest in a few of those if I was you. This is kind of a rare one. This is a mega bass. I'm sorry, not a mega bass. This is a Lucky Craft Pointer 100, and this is a series they came out with a long time ago where it's actually wrapped in eel skin. Like that's real eel skin on there. And I have caught so many fish on these. I only have like 2 or 3 left. I had like 5 or 6 at one time, but these things are incredible. And this is a 2-hook one. And so again, let the fish tell you what they want, the way that they move, the way that they pop. Another really slept on deal. My buddy Jeremy Moldrum of Moldy's Marine, he loves this exact bait right here. I'm trying to do the hand trick thing. This is a Rapala X-Rap. I don't know what the size is. It's teeny tiny. He can actually throw it on bait casting equipment. I prefer to throw these on spinning rods, and we can talk about that in a little bit as we get into how you throw a jerkbait, how you move a jerkbait, that kind of. Focus, camera. Focus. You got to do the hand thing. I feel like such a dork, like Instagram model or something, trying to do the hand behind the lure thing. But these are so slept on and so good. This was one that I was obsessed with as a kid. This is another Lucky Craft Pointer 95, but this is the jointed one. And when this first came out, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I have to have that. The way that it moves in the water, it doesn't really, like, you can see on camera here how it kind of S's. It doesn't really do that much in the water, but doggone it, it looks cool. And it's always a fine line, right? Of, is that lure made more for fishermen or for fish or whatever? And then, of course, there's like some goofy ones. You know, there's some like, this is a lure that was actually really expensive. This lure, I'm sorry, I keep on getting off the mic because I'm trying to go through these lures. This lure was really expensive when it first came out. It's called a Rapala Max Wrap. I don't even know what the number is, but it's massive. Oh, it's got me. It's got me. I'm stuck. I'm hooked. I might have to do the braided line trick here, like on camera. But if you look at this thing, I mean, this thing is massive. This is, you know, 1.5 inches longer than the 110 Magnum. But this is a Rapala, what does it say? Max Wrap 17. It's an ounce. Thing is humongous. But again, everything will eat a jerkbait. Okay? Everything. Pike, muskie, largemouth, smallmouth, panfish, walleyes, lake trout, carp. I don't know, maybe. I've never caught a carp on one, but everything else I've just said I have caught. Trout. I've caught quite a few trout on jerkbaits, like big trout, big rainbows. Everything will eat a jerkbait. And I think here's the why. This is a cool one. These were so popular back in the day, the bait ball series by Live Target. I like this one a lot. But here's something you can try to remember about jerkbaits that makes them a little bit different than every other style of bait is that as you jerk them, they move up and down, they move left to right, and so they don't swim back to you in a straight pattern and in a straight line. And I think that's part of why they work so well, is because in nature, creatures don't swim in straight lines. These are so slept on. If you can find some of these, get you some. The Sabile jerkbaits, these are really, really dope jerkbaits. They have some really cool colors. They're filled in oil. They're called the Culimino. This is a 90, and this is back before Sabile like sold out and gave everything away. But man, Sabile had some really neat designs back in the day. This is a really dope one. This is a Lucky Craft in a color that most people probably wouldn't like, but in the spring, there's something about red. It works so well. This is a red Lucky Craft jerkbait. It's in like that 110-ish size. And then you'll notice a VMC bladed treble up front. Every single time, I am not exaggerating when I say this, on this 3-hook jerkbait, every time I've caught a fish on it, it's been on that bladed treble. Every single time. After I put that on there, every time I get a bite on there, it's on that bladed treble. I can't imagine that's just by like chance. I think that little bit of flash throws it off a little bit, and I like that it makes it stop head down by that little itty bitty extra bit of weight. And then, of course, you know, if you get into jerkbaits that have, this is called a Stacey. This is a pretty slept on Lucky Craft jerkbait. Colors are incredible. Big bill, much deeper diving. You can tell just by looking at it here on camera. The bill is longer and wider, so it's going to get down deeper, and it's going to get down deeper faster. But this is a great Lucky Craft Stacey jerkbait. If you don't know about that, you should look them up. They're great. You can find them on eBay pretty cheap sometimes too. You know, because why not save a little money? I don't know what else I have in this other jerkbait box. Let's open it up. Oh, I got a bunch of good stuff in here. Oh, daddy. Oh, boy. So, my boy Justin Hamner. Justin, if you watch this, you can't have these. But Excalibur made some incredible lures back in the day. The Excalibur lipless, the Excalibur square bills, and these Excalibur jerkbaits. This is sort of like the Elegy bone color. It's got that bone pattern, blue head. This is an Excalibur XEE4. Has a weight transfer system. If you listen to it, really good rattles. There is a certain thing about tone with rattles, and there's Megabass has silent jerkbaits. You know, the Stunna, I think, has silent jerkbaits. There's a bunch of companies that have silent, and they have rattles like this Excalibur. This is an absolute monster. I have caught so many fish on this dang thing. And even though Justin Hamner is a Bassmaster Classic winning angler, even if he asked me for this, he still can't have it. He still can't have it? That sounds so dubious. He still can't not get it. But yeah, there's some in there. What else do I have in here? I got some Spro sticks. That's another one that came out a long time ago. The Spro stick was really, really popular for a while. And one of my favorites that you do not see people throwing is the McRip by Spro, which is a little shorter one with a little deeper bill. This is kind of a sexy shad color. That is a fish catching machine. And then, you know, go to Walmart. No diss. Like, not everything has to be so freaking expensive and whatever. So like, this is a KVD jerkbait. These work. They were designed by a guy named KVD, who, have you ever seen him? He's pretty freaking good with a jerkbait. And these work really well, and they're not very expensive. They have decent hooks. I got a whole box full of Smithwick Rogues and some Rapala, rip stops, and all kinds of different stuff. This is I got a bunch of these, the Sixth Sense Provoke. These are great jerkbaits too. If you've not fished these, again, I think you can get these at Walmart as well now. The only one I will say right out of the gates, if we're talking brands and stuff, is the Smithwick stuff. As much as I love it, even these are called the Perfect 10s. These are an awesome bait, a little bit bigger. They move so well. Good rattles. The one thing I will say about the Smithwick stuff, in my opinion, and you don't have to take what I'm saying like I know everything, because I 1,000,000% don't. But the Smithwick stuff, I wouldn't trust the hooks. No diss. I think that's one thing you get out of. I hear people a lot say, like, why would you spend so much on an Edo Shiner, this Megabass jerkbait here? Like, why would you spend $27 on that thing? Well, because I don't have to do anything with it. The paint is incredible. I know it's going to hold up. The hooks are incredible, and I know it's going to move the way that I want it to right out of the box. And there's a lot of things that factor in to whether your bait floats or sinks or is perfectly neutrally buoyant. And we'll get into that as I get through my notes right here. But on stuff like the Megabass, like the Jackal Re-Range, like those Lucky Craft pointers and the Stasies, like the Duo stuff, they're going to be a little more tunable, a little more consistent out of the box than like a Smithwick Rogue. And that's not a diss to Smithwick whatsoever. I could talk about jerkbaits. I can just show you all these different ones all day long. Another really great, often slept on jerkbait. I like them in the smaller sizes. I like them in the longer ones too, but I like the smaller ones, is the Yozuri stuff. Some of their 3D stuff. They make some really, really good jerkbaits that just work well. They're easy to throw. They look good, and they're not terribly expensive. I also like the new Shimano World Minnows. They have that little like flash vibrate thing in them. So like when you're popping them, it's like this little thing on the inside goes and just kind of shimmies a little bit. I think those are really sick. I've not caught a fish on them yet, so maybe they're not that sick, but I like how they look. Some Megabass Vision 110 Juniors work really well. And then this is a weird Molix, which is that Italian company. I haven't thrown this yet, but I think it's a really cool looking color jerkbait, kind of a different profile, you know. Oh, here's a neat one here. Okay, last one, and then we'll move on. Get off. Getting them all tied up. That's the one thing, man. Like, when you go to get through your box and there's 50 different lures in each little slot. This is called a Daiwa Pro Rex that I got in the UK. This is a lipless jerkbait. So this is a jerkbait. It's neutrally buoyant, but it has no lip, but it still works like a jerkbait. I've only thrown it a couple times because I'm like nervous about losing it, but it's really cool looking. Again, if you're just listening to this, I would definitely watch it on the Yerturbs. It's kind of a cool bait. Also, one of my favorites that I didn't show you, must be in the boat. Nishine Lure Works are incredible. They have a whole series called the Erie, like Lake Erie, EERIE. They make those in different depths, different sinking, floating, shallow running, and they are awesome. Colors, size, hooks, they are really, really dope baits, and they're just a little bit cheaper actually than Mega Bass. I think they're $20 per jerk bait versus like the 25 to 27 for a Mega Bass, for a 110 or a Great Hunting or an Ito or a Katana or Kanata, not Katana. Should be Katana, but it's Kanata for that bigger one, which I think is like a 130. Anyway, but that's that. So there's a whole bunch of different jerk baits. They come in every style, size, and like I said, they catch everything you can imagine catching. They will catch panfish, they'll catch bass, they'll catch pike, they'll catch muskies, really legitimately anything. Okay, sorry about that. I had to stop, as I said earlier. You can hear it in my throat. I'm not feeling too well, and I had to stop and go get I actually got apple juice in my little grizzly cup. So now let's talk rods and reels. Ouch. I only have two main rods, two main combos that I throw jerk baits on. Here on this rod is another Lucky Craft pointer. I think this one's called like root beer pineapple craw or something like that. It's yeller, and then it has a brown back with like splatter, a 90. This thing is awesome. Like legit, this is such a good jerk bait. Anyway, this is a all right. Sorry about that. Coming back to you. I had to stop. I told you I had a cough or a influenza A, which is really like respiratory system stuff. And I was just kind of needing to cough. So I stopped and I got some apple juice in my trusty Grizzly cup. Actually, it's a Grizzly water bottle without the top on it. But now that we've talked about a bunch of jerk baits and styles and colors and showed you a bunch, let's talk rod and reel setups. Now, there's obviously a good argument to be made, a very valid argument to be made, especially on, I like them on smaller ones. Let's see. So like this is a really good color. It's like I don't remember what it is, brook trout or something like that. Brook trout, smaller Rapala X-Rap, really little guy. That's a great jerk bait right there. I prefer to throw this on a spinning rod. And when I throw jerk baits on a spinning rod, I'll literally put my hand, not the real hand, so if you're right-handed or left-handed, but your other hand that you're holding the rod with, I'll put my pointer finger on the top of the rod and kind of point it down as I'm popping it. And that works really good on a spinning rod. So there's an argument to be made, spinning or bait casting. 90% of my jerk baiting, I'm going to be using a bait casting rod and reel. Why? I like the accuracy for the casting. I like that I can slow it down with my thumb on a bait casting reel. I like using a little heavier line. For me, the line to bait is really simple. 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon. That's it. Unless I get into really, 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 really cold water and I'm doing like the Aaron Martin's drink hot chocolate method, where I'm letting it pause for like a super long amount of time for a couple of reasons. One, in really, really, really cold weather, fluoro gets more like rigid, less supple, more line memory-ish. And if you're letting it pause, so let's just hold one up, this Lucky Craft Stacey. If you're letting it pause for 2-3 seconds, it probably doesn't make any difference in the world if you're using fluorocarbon. But what do we know about fluoro? It what? sinks, fluorocarbon sinks. And using a thin diameter fluorocarbon, like 10 or 12, is what allows jerk baits to get to their maximum depth. If you go up in line size to like 15, which I do sometimes, you're not going to get as much depth out of it because there's more resistance in the water because of that thicker line. So if you're doing really long pauses, 7, 10, 20 second, that's a real thing, pauses. And it's funny, I hate using Carolina rigs, but I can rock a 30-second pause on a jerk bait all day long. Pop, pop, 30 seconds. Pop, pop. I don't know why. But if you're letting it sit for that long and fluorocarbon sinks, what will happen is that sinking line will start to actually sink down your lure too. And then you lose that legitimate, like, natural buoyancy. And so I don't think this is a very common deal. I don't know how many people actually do this. But when it's really, really cold, I'll actually spool up my jerkbait rods with mono. I'll use a heavier mono, like a 15 or 17 mono. And I get great results out of it. When it's really cold, I don't get as much line memory. I don't know how much that actually matters for what I just said, like the long pauses, but I catch good fish on mono, even though there's stretch and even though it's not as, nick resistant and abrasion resistant as fluoro, whatever, but it works for me. So this is one of my bait casting combos here. It's a Daiwa Tatula reel. The gear ratio is 7-1. I like it right in that 7 range, 7-1, 7-3. You can go faster, you can go slower. That's one thing about fishing that I do and I don't like. Sometimes people will talk about their combo as if like that's the only way to do it. And that's just not the case. Whatever works for you, whatever feels good for you, whatever you think this makes sense, and you can catch fish on it and like duplicate it and catch more fish on it, then do that, yeah. So whatever. Anyway. So if you like slower, if you like faster, if you like spinning for every jerk bait, dope, dude, knock yourself out. I like bait casting and then spinning for smaller stuff. This is a Megabass Levante jerkbait rod. So it's 6'11". I think it's medium heavy-ish, but it's got a perfect grip. Where the split is very small. So as you're working a jerkbait, you're not hitting yourself in the ribs and kind of getting in your own way a lot. It has the hook keep down by the butt, which I like a lot. And yeah, these are great rods for jerk baiting. You would have to think, obviously, Megabass makes the best jerk bait on the market in the 110 and the other variations. So they probably make a pretty good jerk bait rod. And this one, for being a Megabass, is air quotes affordable. I think it's like $200, which for a Megabass rod is pretty good. And this is spooled up with 12-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon, which is, in my opinion, the best fluoro I've ever used. It is so supple and so smooth and casts an absolute mile. It's abrasion resistant. It doesn't get very line memory-ish. It is incredible. I really like Sunline Shooter. I like Sunline Sniper. I like Seagar Tatsu. There's a bunch of good lines out there, but as far as fluoro, the Shimano Mastiff, and again, no sponsorship, this is just my opinion, is the best stuff going. Why do you want to use a shorter rod? So that one's 6'11". This other one, if I can get to it, this is a Denali lithium jerkbait rod. This one is 6'8", and this is a medium action. So with a shorter rod, as you're popping down, if you're on the deck of your boat, if you're on a dock, if you're from shore, you're not. That was my swashling. I don't know what I'm saying. You're not getting the tip of your rod in the water as much with a shorter rod, right? So that makes sense. This is a medium. It has really good backbone at the very butt, down by the lower part of the rod, but the end has a bunch of bend in it. So I will say this is a 110+1 Megabass crankbait, idiot, jerkbait on this rod. And then this is a Lew's Tournament Pro G. I think it's a 7.3-1. Again, I like those 7.5-ish, somewhere in that range, gear ratio reel. If you don't know what that means, really, really easy explanation. So if it says 7.3 to 1, what that means is for every one full crank of the reel handle, the spool on the inside of the reel is going around 7.3 times. If you have one that's a 5.1 to 1, that means for every one turn of the reel handle, the spool is spinning 5 times, or 9 to 1, or whatever. There's different usages for different gear ratios, and I like that 7-ish, mid 7, high 7s for a jerkbait reel. I think it just makes sense. That's the same line on there. That's 12-pound Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon. I like that a lot. What I was going to say really quick about the hook set, when I first started throwing jerkbaits back in like the 1400s, because I'm very, very old, I was trying to jack them. When I would feel that bite, and sometimes when you're working a jerkbait, and we're going to talk about how you work a jerkbait in just a second here, as you're popping it, as you're jerking it, it's not always the super hard hit, although sometimes it is. Sometimes smallmouth on the pause, they'll about pull the rod out of your hands. But a lot of times what it is as you're going to make that jerk, you see the rod load up. As you're pulling back down and taking all the slack out of the line, you see your rod start to load up, and then it's just kind of a pull. It's almost well, it's not exactly drop shot hook set, but you're not stepping back like a flip and bite or a punch and bite and ripping their face off. It's more of a nice smooth pull. And that's where I was going to say something else. Like I said about the Smith wicks, again, no diss, but you want to make sure your hooks on your jerkbaits are sticky sharp. Like where you go to pull them out of your box and all the hooks are stuck in your hands because they're just that sharp. I will actually bring a file I have a file in the boat. And I kid you not, anytime where I go to fish jerkbaits, the first time I throw them that day, I'll just real quick all the corners of every treble hook that I'm about to throw, because I want to make sure, because a lot of times when the fish bite, you're not necessarily in like the perfect body posture to get a good hook set, and it becomes more of a sweep. And so I want to make sure that those hooks are just sticky sharp and ready to get in there and really give me a good hook set. How to work a jerkbait. There are so many ways to do this, and I honestly believe there's not necessarily a wrong way to do it if it works for you. But I will say there are some ways that probably work better than others. The most simple cadence, kind of rhythm is 4+2. That's what I call it. Okay, so what that means is anytime let's go like as basic as you can get, 101 jerkbait. I make a long cast. I don't know if I can really show you because I'm going to bump my rod into stuff in the garage studio here, but I make a long cast. Yeah, I just ran into something. I make a long cast, and the first thing you want to do once your lure hits the water is you want to crank down 4 or 5 good cranks. Dunk, 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 dunk. You want to crank it down. Excuse me. And that's one mistake I see a lot of people make when they're jerkbaiting is they make a cast and then they start jerking it. You want to get it down to the depth you want to see it run at. Now, if you have forward-facing sonar, you can watch it get down to the depth you want it at. And if you don't, that's 1,000,000% okay. Just crank it down 4 or 5 good times, let it sit, and then 4+2. So that means pop, 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 pop. That's 4, sit. Pop, pop, sit. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, pause. And that's a really simple cadence. 2 + 4, 4 + 2. That's a really simple cadence that works super well. That's a great place to start if you're not super familiar with how to do it. And let me just give you like the most simple but 100% necessary fact about working a jerkbait. Always on slack line. Always on slack line. And a great easy way to get that slack line in your jerkbait is always point the tip of your rod back at where the jerkbait is as you're jerking it. It's all on your wrist. You're not using your whole arm and your shoulder and your elbow. It's all on the wrist. Whap, whap. But what if you're watching on YouTube, watch my hands, whap, whap. I'm coming back to where the lure is. I'm pointed out, ta, ta, and I'm pointed back at it. I'm not just popping it down and leaving it. I'm popping it and I'm jerking it and I'm pointing back where it is. And what that does is it puts a little bit of bow in your line. Because what you want is when you're working that jerkbait, you're popping it, dot, dot, dot. You want to dunk. You want to just stop. Like that. Let me clear my throat. When I say freeze, y'all stop one time. When I say freeze, y'all stop on a dime. Freeze. That's what the jerk bait is doing. You don't want it jerk, 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 and then you're jerking on tight line. You're jerking on not slack line, and so then when you stop it, it's still kind of moving forward. That's what's going to happen. If you're not pointing your line, the tip of your rod with the line back at that bait, when you stop it, you're going to still be pulling it forward, and that's not what you want. You want bam, bam, bang, dead stop. When I say freeze, y'all stop one time. Like just bam, it's jetting all over, it's rattling all over, it's making noise, bam, and it freezes. Boy, those fish cannot even think about denying it. So you always want to point back at your lure in the water. You don't have to like jerk it straight in, like the lure doesn't have to be like dead straight in front of you. You can do it sideways. Like you can be like off to your left and kind of pop it to the right, but as you are reeling and popping your right, you want to point it back at the lure in the water every time. I cannot overemphasize, point it back at the lure in the water every single time. If you do not, you are not working it right, and you're not going to get it to freeze the way that you want it to. It's just not going to happen. There's erratic cadences. Those can work really well sometimes. One of my secret little cadences is instead of doing like good jerks, I'll do like just little mini ones, but I'll do it like quicker. So instead of like 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, just little itty bitty, teeny little micro movements. And I do that a lot in colder water. One thing to think about is water temp equals speed. Not always. This is not gospel. And again, that's the great thing about fishing is let the fish tell you what they want. Just like tacos, maybe you shouldn't have this kind of salsa with this kind of protein. F that. Eat it how you want it. If you like it that way, great. Let the fish tell you how they want it. Most of the time, water temperature dictates speed. If it's warmer, work it faster. If it's slower, work it. If it's warmer, work it faster. If it's colder, work your jerkbait slower. Longer pauses, less hard, like on your rips, less hard ones, maybe littler ones, maybe like 1, 2, pause, 1, pause, 1, 2, pause, like longer pauses, less jerks in between the pauses. And then this is one that a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't do that. I will literally do this when it's really cold, early season, when I reel my crank, or golly, why do I keep on calling jerkbaits crankbaits? I guess you are kind of cranking it in, or I'm just dumb and tired and sick and whatever. Anyway, as you're cranking down your jerkbait to your depth on the beginning part of your retrieve, sometimes I will literally keep my rod tip down and kind of pointed at the jerkbait, and I'll just slowly crank it in. Almost like dead stick in a Cinco. Almost no movement at all. It'll have a little bit of shimmy, and that's not really how you're, air quotes again, supposed to work a jerkbait, and I will catch fish like that. I promise you I will catch fish like that. Another secret thing that a lot of guys don't like to talk about is a longer lipped jerkbait. Like this Megabass 110+1 is awesome up shallow around wooden laydowns. It will deflect off of laydowns just like a hunting square bill will do. That's an awesome option around laydowns, around dock pilings. And obviously you want to be careful if you're up near like, Cheerio eaters or pike or whatever, that'll eat anything. You don't, it's a crappy feeling when you get bit off on a $5 jig by a pike. It's a crappier feeling when you get bit off by a pike on a $27 jerkbait. That really hurts. But these are awesome up shallow. And a lot of guys don't do that. And you maybe should. Again, I can't overemphasize this. Always, always, always on slack line. Always on slack line. Point your rod tip right back at that lure. Always on slack line. Whether you're ripping it hard, like in the warmer weather, like in the spring into like the summertime. If I'm in like kind of shallowish, 3-4 feet, which a jerkbait works awesome in. I'm pulling it. Boom, 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 boom. I'm pointing back at it every time, but I'm not even stopping it. Because what's happening is that jerkbait, sticky, again, they're sticky. That thing was just stuck in my finger. It's just ripping by and it's going like crazy directions all over the place. And you can stop it, sure, but like, let it go, dude. And then here's one that I found that I've never heard another single person say works. And I very much try to like, to the point of being pretty nerdy, I try to like envision when I'm throwing anything, a frog, a jerkbait, and anything, I try to really envision like what's going on under the water, like what's happening if I was that lure, how would I behave? You know, like, so sometimes I'll literally throw frogs all the way up on shore on purpose, and then I'll drag them back into the water as if a frog just came off the shore into the water. With forward-facing sonar, this is kind of confirmed one of my beliefs that works really well. The minnow and jig head, right, which is the only thing people fish with anymore. Anybody who knows what they're talking about with that presentation knows what you want it above the fish's head, because most of the time, not always, certainly a jig or a Ned rig or a Carolina rig prove that fish will eat down. But most of the time, you know, their eyes are on the top of their heads. Most of the time, the fish want to feed up. Okay. I always had this thought a long time ago, and I've been proven right on this with my own fishing, because when I first started fishing jerkbaits, now this is going to really make you know how old I am. When I first started fishing jerkbaits, there was no internet. How did you live? And so the way that I learned how to use a jerkbait was by going out and using one. Okay, I tried that. That didn't work at all. I tried that. Oh, that kind of worked. What if I tweaked that a little? Oh, that really worked, or whatever. And there was a time up in, again, Hayward, Wisconsin, where I found these small jaws off of a area that had crystal clear water, reeds, and then lay downs way off the shore, and then a pretty good cut, like a pretty deep drop. And I didn't have any kind of electronics, nothing like that. But I had caught smallmouth while trying to bobber fish for panfish. So then I was like, oh, there's smallmouth here. I'm going to throw this jerkbait. And you could literally, with your eyeballs, with no electronics, you could see schools of them, 4, 5, 7, 9 smallmouth come chasing out off this little cut after my jerkbait. And I would work it in really quick because they pursue it quick. And sometimes they wouldn't get it. I couldn't get a bite on it. And I got to thinking, like, okay, so if I'm a minnow and in this circumstance, I have these fish after me, what am I going to do? Because what I would do originally is I would pop it, and I would stop it, and then they would all just swim away. And I'm like, but that's what you do with a jerkbait. You pause it because it's neutrally buoyant. But then I got to thinking, if I was being chased by a bunch of predatory animals, I wouldn't stop. I would speed up, or I would try to go to the side, or I'd try to go down, or I'd try to go up. I'd try to do something to lose them. And I remember one time, I don't know if it was on accident, I could just say I did it on purpose to make myself sound smarter. I tried to raise my rod tip up to make the jerkbait come up a little bit in the water column. And I'm talking about the second I did that, again, I think it's because fish like to feed up. My jerkbait, I'm not exaggerating. I think it was the first or second time I did that little move where, usually you're jerking your jerkbait down, but I kind of popped it up, like reeled in some slack and pulled it up. It was like legitimately like Shark Week, like where they have those dummies out and the sharks come up and come like up through the water and crash back down with it. A smallmouth took it was either an X-Wrap or a Husky jerk at the time, took it and came through the surface of the water. It was like flapping around and then came back in. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then now with forward-facing sonar, as I've been jerkbaiting, I've seen that happen before, and I reel my jerkbait up and they come up and just, there's something about an upward presentation, not always, obviously, but that actually works. And I've never heard anybody else ever talk about that. But I think what's happening with the predatory instincts is if you speed up on your pops or your retrieve, and then you go to pull up, I think the bass are like, oh, you messed up, because they can see so well up because their eyes are mounted on the top of their heads. So when that jerkbait moves up in the water column, the bass are just like, simply irresistible. She don't find, there's no telling where the money went, or whatever that song goes. But I think they just can't resist it. It's just too easy. They're like, you made a mistake, minnow, you're dead. And then they just smoke it. So that's a really cool way to do it. What else? Ripping, erratic cadences, hook set, tips and tricks. Here we go. Tips and tricks. Again, like I said, make sure you know that braided line to get a hook out of your skin trick, because there's something about a jerkbait. I don't know what it is. I think every time I've had to do that braided line trick to remove a treble out of my hand, it's been on a jerkbait, I think, where it's like really buried in, and it's not nearly as bad as you think it is. Fly fishing wire wrapped around the kind of like the meat of a hook is a really great way to get your jerkbait to sink or be a little bit more neutrally buoyant. You can use suspend dots or suspend strips, but they suck. They just suck. If you're going to use suspend dots or suspend strips, I don't know if I used to have a couple small packages in some of my jerkbait boxes, but I probably stopped. They suck. If you have those, you might as well pack with some super glue as well, which I know a lot of us use for soft plastics. But the suspend dots or suspend strips are not going to stick very well. One of the best places, real quick, if you're going to put a suspend strip on a jerkbait, is right in between the first and belly hook of the jerkbait itself. So if you're on YouTube right here, you can put a suspend strip right there. And again, I would definitely super glue it in. But that's a good place to do it. If you do it too far forward, it gets too tippy. If you do it too far backwards, this is the worst way. You never really want it falling tail first, because then when you go to jerk it, it's not going to work right. If you have it nose down, that's not the worst thing. I've actually experimented with putting suspend dots on the bill itself to get it to nose down or on the forehead or whatever. But I definitely found that in between the first and second hook with a suspend strip is the best location to not negatively affect the lure itself and to get that weight, and it kind of centers it and whatever, but they do kind of suck. But that fly line, that fly fishing wire works super, super good. Again, like I said, those VMC bladed hooks, those work super good. They're kind of a double benefit thing. One, they add a little more weight. So, if you have a jerkbait that's sinking, this will add a little more weight. And then number two, that little bit of flash as it's popping by. I don't know what it is. Like I said, on this Lucky Craft that I'm showing you right now, I have caught so many fish on this bait, and I am not exaggerating. I think every single one I've caught on it has been on that VMC bladed treble. And they're not very expensive. You get a 2-pack for like $6 or $7, I think. Maybe I'm off on the price there. Foam cups. So foam cups, if you have a jerkbait that is sinking, you can do a couple things. You can add lighter wire hooks. I hate changing hooks, but obviously it's a necessary evil, so I do it. Otherwise, you can take a piece of Chick-fil-A or like coffee cup or whatever, and you can cut a teeny little strip on it, like the size of like a suspend strip, and super glue it to the top of the spine of the jerkbait right here, and that'll cause it to float a little bit. I know it sounds stupid, but it's not, and it actually works. That's something that people have been doing for a long time. There are so many, you can Dremel the lips a little bit, just like on a jerkbait. Dremel tools make the lips thinner. That'll cause it to dart down a little bit more. You can actually empty out some of on a mega bass. I've only done it on a few. I didn't really notice that big of a change. But if you Dremel out a little bit of the lip, you can get it to move a little bit different in the water. It seems stupid to modify a $27 bait or $25 bait or whatever, but it works. One really, really good practical tip. If you start noticing, either you're feeling it, seeing it on forward facing sonar, seeing it with your eyes in clear water, if you start noticing that fish are getting that back treble, okay, so they're short striking it, but not really getting a hook set on them, kind of like when you add like a stinger hook on a spinner bait. If you start noticing that, a really simple, really like practical, you wouldn't think it would make as much of a difference as it does, but it does. One thing you can do is add a couple split rings to this back hook. So what that does is it makes it look like your Edo Shiner here is rocking a chain wallet, but it just allows that hook to be a little bit lower and swing a little bit more free. And I'm not kidding. If you start getting into a school of, I've actually only had it work, I think, I could be wrong, but I think the only time I've ever done it and had it work is with smallmouth, but where I'm getting bites, but I'm not getting hook sets, which is not super common, because usually when they bite a jerkbait, boom, I mean, they're just cracking it. But when I was fishing in a school of smallmouth and added extra split rings. I think I heard about it from somebody somewhere or read about it somewhere in a book, and instantly started catching fish one after the other. So you can add one split ring, you can add two, you could add 4 or 5, I don't know, but it allows it to hang down a little bit, allows it to flop around a little more, be a little more free flowing, and then it ups your game on a hook set. You can do the braided line tie thing. So instead of running a split ring on the nose for the line tie, you can add a ring made out of braided line, or a really, really dope trick is take the split ring off entirely and then actually do a loop knot, like the old school Rapala loop knot, and do a big one. Do a big loop knot, like a visibly large loop knot no split ring, right to the line tie, and that'll allow it to move a little bit more. You get a little more floppy jalopy action out of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's so many. I have a couple older Sabile jerk baits, like the Coolie, where I drilled into them with a teeny little drill, added more oil, epoxied over them to make them a little heavier so they sink a little faster. So when you're popping them up, it's like this snappy, almost yo-yo action. I don't know if I have anything else. I feel like that's everything, most everything I know about jerk baits. I promise I'm not leaving anything out on purpose. I want to say thank you to Ken Duke for jumping in and setting me straight on the Rapala original minnow being like the first ever jerk bait. Just wasn't really modified to be neutral yet, neutrally buoyant. But I hope somebody can watch or listen to this podcast and go out there with jerk baits. And like Justin Hamner said, now this is a dude who is, I think there's probably an argument to be made, the best jerkbait fisherman out there right now. At least he caught an 11 pounder on live on Lake Fork last year on a jerkbait. He won the Bassmaster Classic on a jerkbait. And even it's just after talking to him, I said, what's one tip you give us? And he said, they work everywhere all the time. Everybody always thinks clear water, cold water jerkbaits. Dude, get that out of your head. Again, the great thing about a jerkbait is the erratic action. It doesn't just in a straight line. You pop it and it darts and it swims to the left and it goes down and it comes right and then boop, stops on a dime, which again, I can't overemphasize, slack line. You do not want to be working your jerk bait in where you're working it so hard that you're pulling it. When you're jerking it on slack line, it's causing it to dart, and then you stop it and it just freezes. And obviously you're reeling in as you go. You're not just like jerking. So like the line never even like moves the lure. You don't want so much slack, but you want, if you look out at the end of your line on your pauses, if your line is not doing like a kind of a dip into the water, then your line's too tight. You always want to be jerking on that slack line, and you always want to point your rod tip back at the bait. Again, I don't believe, some people think you can only jerk bait pointed straight at it, just dead in front, whop, whop, whop. Maybe it works better for them or for you or in general. I'm not sure, but I'll do it sideways, or I'll make a cast off to the side and pop it in the other way. But always point your rod back at that lure in the water. That allows that bow and it allows it to freeze. If it's jerking all over and it doesn't freeze, it's not working as well as it could. I think that's all I got. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really hope you get out there and throw some jerk baits this year. Hopefully some of these tips, hopefully some of these little tricks or whatever help you. If you ever want to, just so anybody knows, hit us up, man, on social media, message us. We had a fellow the other day, I posted a video of me throwing a jackhammer, Bee Height Delight, of course. Although I will say, for the money, I think my new is that Z-Man Evo, not even the Elite, not even the tungsten one, but just the Z-Man Evo and Hot Snakes. It's really close to the Bee Height Delight. To me, it swims just as well, and it's like $5, $6, $7 cheaper. So why wouldn't I throw that one? Anyway, I posted a random video of me with a GoPro catching a bass on a jackhammer, and this fellow was like, "Oh, what's your setup like?" And so I told him like what lure, what color, what trailer. If I'm fishing docks, I like to go half ounce because they skip easier, so I can under the dock a little better. I love interacting with people on fishing stuff, and me, Nate, Lola, we're not experts, but what we are is total open books. So anything, like even today on this jerkbait episode, some of this stuff probably didn't help some people. They're probably like, "Yeah, I already knew all that." Awesome. Some people probably never heard of any of the crap I was just talking about, and maybe that does help them. We might not be experts, but we are willing to help with anything we got. So if you want a message or comment or whatever, we appreciate the fire out of you. And that's it for this one. We will catch you on the next one. Positivity is worth the effort. Ooh, jerkbait, man. I can't wait to go fishing. All right, bye. Whoops.